Good morning. Welcome to Tuesday Tea Time. I am out in the pasture. I thought I would actually do tea time with my horses today. It's not too foggy. But I started at the new pasture I let them into about a week ago. It's very, very lush, and I thought surely they'll be in with the perfect grass. But I live in a frost hollow, and it's cold out here. So they're not in the new pasture. They've headed across the valley to the sunshine. So I am walking over to where the horses are, and I thought I'd do tea time from there. Today, I thought I'd talk about something that is really integral to the work that I do, but I perhaps don't talk about enough. And that is the idea of watching horses. I find that watching horses is something I do a lot, but it feels perhaps too simple to talk about. And there really shouldn't be something that's too simple to talk about in horse training. We should talk about the things that make a profound difference to us and help us do a better job with our horses. Good morning, Maureen. I'm glad you could make it to tea time. So I have 6 horses in my herd, and I spend an inordinate amount of time watching them. And a lot of people say, well, what do you watch for, Elsa? And what I watch for is sequences. One horse does something. What is the response from the other horses in the herd? These sequences of response are absolutely integral to what they feel and how they respond and how they interact with the world. So watching horses is incredibly powerful. Yay, Rachel, you're here. Excellent. So I'm headed to where my horses are in the sunshine this morning, and I thought I'd talk a little bit about watching. This came up because I have a wonderful student and friend who had a Zoom call with me yesterday, and she said, Elsa, I feel like I haven't done any of my homework. And then she proceeded to tell me all the amazing things she'd been noticing in her herd. And I had to point out to her, she's doing perhaps the most important homework. We often think if we're not asking the horse to do something or building their physical muscle structure, that we're not doing anything at all. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. I really think that watching and understanding them for who they are before we get involved is perhaps the most important homework we do. So a lot of people say, I don't even know what I'm looking at. And this is where that saying, boredom is the birthplace of creativity, comes in. It's not that we want to be creative, it's that we want to notice details that we might otherwise have missed. And so my horses are here. Let's see, we can turn the camera around, I think. There we go. If I turn the camera around, you can see my group here. We've got Ocasio here closest to the camera, and he's very, very alert. You can see a little bit of a lick and a chew as his tongue comes out. You can see his ears don't move, but his eyes sort of slowly trace around the corner as I pass by with the camera. And then you can see that inexorable draw, like he can't resist coming over to say hi and smell my tea and be curious. That's a sequence of events. Z here, he is eating, and as I get closer, you can see him pick up his head. And again, as I walk towards him, you're going to see him pass by me. So you can see his response to my approach is very, very different from Ocasio's. That's interesting. And then over here, we have our older gentlemen in the herd, Atlas and Raz. And Atlas and Raz have a much more steady presence in the world. They just are a little bit slower to make a response, but they absolutely do. Good morning, Atlas. And you can see Raz over there. He just had a lick and a chew, but he's otherwise mostly napping. As I go ahead and pass him, you're going to see both ears come forward. You're going to see one ear go over towards Atlas and the rest of his herd. You're going to see him lick and chew. That's a whole sequence of events. These sequence of events are always happening. So I spend a huge amount of time watching my horses and their sequences of events. What I learned from this is that they are always responding to the world around them, or they're not responding to the world around them, which is equally good information. So as I work around them, or even right here where I just sat down, I can notice the sequence of events that's happening in my herd. How do they respond to the sun coming up or the sun going down? How do they respond to the wind changes? How do they respond to the noises in the environment? Do they pointedly ignore all of them? I don't have to think of that as a freeze state. I mean, I could, but it also could just be a resting state. Like the older horses in particular will spend more time resting than the younger horses. Any of us who are getting older will probably empathize with that. These are natural sequences of events, and I think all of us would do well to watch horses more often. This is going to do a number of things. It's going to help you understand how each horse is unique and different from other horses. It's also going to help you see similarities, the things that they do that are the same as other horses. When you can see patterns and sequences, what that helps you do is it helps you be in the right place at the right time to be part of their environment. If you want to get a response from your horse, do you know the way they like to give responses? Do you know the way they don't like to give responses? It's okay to challenge them sometimes, but knowing that what you do is going to be a challenge is really helpful when you're training. You can choose, now I'd like to challenge my horse, or now I would like to make their life really easy. Part of doing that is knowing your horse well enough to know what is challenging and what is easy. And you only learn that by watching them. The other thing you'll notice is who their friends are at different times of day. So they might choose a particular friend at a particular time of day. And at a different time of day, they might choose a very different friend. So right now behind me, I've got Atlas and Raz. And they are in parallel lines. They are looking the same direction. They are both alternately sleeping and paying attention to the environment in front of them. These things are something that they are very naturally in sync about. Like they agree what's important in life. They agree more than anybody else in the herd. I actually really believe that 5 is an ideal number for a herd. I've got 6 in this herd, but 5 is just a great number. And the reason why I say that is that what you'll find is when you have a group of 5, they will alternate their pairs. They won't always stand with the same horse. They will choose a different horse at different times of day. They will choose a different horse depending on their mood, depending on their energy level, depending on their desires. And watching who they choose to be near is so much good information. There is the other side of this too. And I'm not saying that there's no good reason to keep a horse in a stall. I think there are some very good reasons to keep a horse in a stall. For example, if they're recovering from an injury where they need to be more still while a limb repairs, that would be a good reason to keep their movement down to a smaller number of steps. And there are many good reasons to keep a horse in a stall, but I would encourage you, if you do keep a horse in a stall, how many hours can you sit there and watch them and feel really good about the life that they're living? And maybe you do. Maybe you watch them in the stall and you think, yes, of all the options available, this is the best option for them. But what I find is the thing that humans often do is when something isn't good, we just pretend it's not happening. And so I think humans can lock horses in very small boxes, isolated from all of their creatures, friends, and think it's a perfectly good situation if they just don't watch it. And this is a bit of a human failing, I think. Sarah says, oh, that's good to hear. My mare's herd is 5. Yeah, I find 5 is kind of a magic number. For my students who've had bigger herds and smaller herds, there's something about 5 that makes it easy enough for our human brains to watch. We can kind of see the sequences. We can see how everything falls into place. And yet it's big enough for the horse to have some choice of friends. Who do they want to be with at each moment in time? Now, obviously, you may not have that option. You may have a much smaller herd. You may have a much bigger herd. There's going to be pros and cons to every type of situation. The point I'm getting at here is if you spend enough time watching them and really observing the sequences, and it could be their responses to each other. It also could just be their responses to the environment around them. When you watch this constant ebb and flow of action and response, action and response, action and response, what you're going to find is your brain naturally wants to do the very best it can for your horse friends. So my horse friends over my shoulders here are Raz and Atlas right now. The others are just around the corner. But when I spend enough hours watching them, my brain will naturally start to problem solve. Is this the best quality life I can imagine for them? Is there anything I could do better? And that's where I come back to this idea that boredom is the birthplace of creativity. So if you watch for long enough, your brain will start to be creative in a way that's beneficial for all of your friends. So we're all herd creatures. We're all part of a group naturally. Humans and horses are herd animals. And so if we take this idea of watching our friends, our brain is naturally going to problem solve for a better life. What would be better? Now, I will tell you, I do not sit still very well. I'm sitting still to do tea time for you guys, but generally speaking, sitting still is not my forte. I'm not good at it. So when I am watching the horses, I'm usually working. I am cleaning paddocks. I am fixing fences. I am pulling weeds out of the pasture. I am grooming one of the horses that wants to be groomed. There's a lot of activities that I can do that allow me to watch sequences of events. And you get to tailor this idea of watching to what works for you. And I want you guys to remember there's so many good ways to be. I firmly believe that attention replaces dominance. So I believe we have to use more dominance in our relationships and with our horses when we have less attention for detail. When we take the time to learn about our friends, to the degree we understand them, we will use less and less pressure. And this is a very natural thing. I don't think we have to try and do it. I think this comes very naturally. So when you are aware of sequences, when you are aware of what happens next, you can just simply be in the right place at the right time to have the best interactions possible. You're not always having to put pressure on your horse to behave better. Now, you can. That is always an option. And I'm never going to take that away from you because I believe in freedom of choice. I, in my own relationship, have found that when I spend hours and hours watching my herd and watching the interactions between them, I am going to choose to do things with less pressure because I watch when they put more pressure on each other. and I watch when they put less pressure on each other. And I get to watch the way friendships become better between horses in the herd and the way friendships become worse between horses in the herd. And through all of that information gathering, my brain then gets to problem solve. How would I be the best friend I could possibly be? How would I fit into this horse's life in a way that truly makes his life better? I don't have all the answers, but I am going to spend enough time watching that my brain starts to seek answers. And this is going to go for everybody. You don't have to be great at this to have a good perspective. You just have to invest enough time watching and allowing your brain to be a little bit bored so that it starts to come up with good ideas. How can I make everybody's life better in this group of friends that I have? Nancy says, so an uneven number that's one on movement because they're bored and want some change. So Nancy, that's possible. When we have an uneven number of horses like 5, which I really like, there is one horse that doesn't naturally have a pair bond. And that one horse that naturally doesn't have a pair bond is going to do any number of things, which is interesting to watch. They're either going to become a third, where they join other horses in a parallel line and they become a third in a pair bond. And that's beautiful and interesting. They're going to have some alone time where they go behind a tree or a bush and they just want to be by themselves for a while. And that's also interesting. They are going to be on the move and a little bit restless, trying to steal the attention from one of the other horses. Can I win myself a friend out of one of the other pair bonds? Then you get to see how intelligent they are about it. Do they use pressure? Do they use resource guarding? Do they use some clever novelty idea where they find something interesting and they lure another friend away from a pair bond? So watching what the 5th horse does is absolutely an education. What I find is when you have an even number, very often they will just all pair up. Everybody has a friend. And if everybody has a friend, they don't as often have the motivation to try new and interesting things. When you get that odd number, there's almost always an odd man out that has a little bit of extra motivation to see if he can get noticed or to join as a third into a naturally forming pair bond and just get along. This is always interesting. Now, you're going to also have this when you have an even number of horses because not everybody wants the same friend at every time of day. You're just going to see it a little bit more clearly when you have an odd number. So Cindy says, hi Elsa, my herd of 3 has now become a pair of 2 since I rehomed one of the other 2 here. Are so much more compatible, more comfortable in the environment, and the interactions are a lot smaller and quieter, but they're so huge in how they both communicate and get along. I'm now fitting into this herd in a different way. I'm the leader, the follower, the entertainer, and the friend. So I happen to know Cindy a little bit, and I know where she lives. And Cindy, I have a feeling you are the odd number in your herd because your horses live so close to you. Your horses they can see you through the windows of your house. And I have a feeling that the way you live with your horses, Cindy, you are the odd numbered horse. And that's a really interesting thing. Whatever it is that you're doing around the house, whatever it is that you're doing in the house that they can see you moving through the windows, they think of you as an extra herd member. I don't live that close to my horses. I'm over 15 minutes walk away from all of these guys in the pasture. So they don't think of me as an ongoing herd member in the same way. I visit for, a number of hours every day, and then I leave again. I would say that my daughter's horses that live right outside the window of my house, they probably think of me as more of a herd member. And I know this because I wake up in the middle of the night and they're lying down as close to my window as they can possibly get. And it really feels like they seek me out as a third in their herd there, which is really interesting. So again, these are things we only notice by watching different herds, watching different environments, watching the responses to different friends, and watching the responses to different environments. Your horse is part of a bigger picture. They're never an isolated individual. They are always receiving information from the friends around them, the environment around them, and their own nervous system, and then making the responses that feel best to them, or eliciting responses from others around them. This is what we learn by watching. Nancy says, maybe not bored, but sometimes they need company and things. Yes, exactly, Nancy. They are herd animals. They need responses. Now, if a horse is particularly socially awkward, which I think happens, some of them are just not good at having friends, you're going to find those horses need company but don't know how to ask for it. And if they are frustrated often enough, sometimes their own company or the company of the view across the field feels better than the company of another horse. This is another thing we learn about them. So some horses are not socially skilled, and they will choose their own company over the company of others. I really believe we can help this. We can change this. We can facilitate it. And that's all the work that I teach when I teach my clinics and my online courses, and all the work that I do is I help horses become more sensorially strong and adaptive, which makes them more socially able. And I love this work. I just think that I probably should talk about the watching aspect a little bit more than I do, because not everything is about doing. Some things is just about gathering the information. So when we choose to take action, we make really good choices. Nancy says, yeah, extra motivation is a good word. Yep. So having a little extra motivation to interact with others is a beautiful thing that's going to happen in cycles and patterns within your herd. Sometimes they're just going to be too sleepy and too tired, and they don't have any motivation to respond or react or interact. They just want to rest. And you're going to see this more and more as they get older. But then when they do, what's the pattern that you notice? Do you notice a whole decision-making tree that happens with your horse in terms of giving a response or getting a response? And that might be to another horse or to some aspect of the environment. Giving and getting responses is what being alive is all about. And every living individual is going to do that a little bit differently. Connie says, hi Elsa, I only have 2 and Var is an older fjord. My horses see me too in my house. Interesting. Yeah. So for those of you who live really close to your horses, my guess is they think of you as another member of the herd. For those of you who live farther away like me, you're going to be more of a visitor. You're not necessarily going to be a member of a herd in the same way. This is not good or bad. This is just interesting. What does your horse respond to? What do they respond to voluntarily? What do they need a little added pressure in order to respond? This is all things we learn when we're watching. Cindy says, you're so right. I love your insight. I'm the 3rd herd member. Yep. I think that's going to be true for a lot of you guys who live that close to your horses. And again, not good, bad, or indifferent. Everything means something. Nothing means nothing. And being able to watch your horses and let your brain just tease out the details. Of course, we're going to interpret details through the lens of our own experience, which means it's not entirely accurate. None of us are a horse per se. So we won't see things exactly the way they see things. Lord knows we don't even know how to see things the way our best human friends see things. Being able to see something through someone else's eyes is an art form. But if we watch enough, we will do our best to see sequences that are logical and sequential. We don't need to know why. We don't need to know why the horse made those choices, but we need to see what they do. We are all habitual creatures. We rarely do things just once. Anything we do tends to be repeated again in the right circumstances. So the more you watch your horses, the more different circumstances you're going to see them in. The more you're going to see what their natural responses are in that circumstance. The more you're going to be able to plan when you ask for things, when you pause, when you let them rest, when you distract them, when you encourage them, when you motivate them, and when you let them process what happened before. This is the work that I do with horses in action, is I help them do all of those things better. But I'm going to encourage you guys, just take time to watch your herd or your horse. If you only have one horse, you're going to watch how they interact with the environment. Sometimes I have a little one-legged bird in my paddock. It's quite a feisty little bird. Doesn't seem to have any problem hopping around on one leg. It's very territorial, chases the other little birds out of the way. But he is also an aspect they may ignore, they may notice, they may pay attention to, they may not. I don't think he's thought of as part of the herd, but he is part of the environment, and he is something that is responded to. Noticing if the horses notice him, noticing if the horses don't notice him. This is all really valuable information for me to know who they are, what they like, what they do, what they notice. And then when I'm interacting with them, I can make better choices. Connie says, I'm thinking of if and when she departs and Doc being alone. Yeah, so if you only have 2 horses, this is a really important thing to think about. When one of your horses passes, there will be grief. There will absolutely be grief. It might look different from human grief. It might look the same. I don't know. Every animal's a little bit different. Having a social structure to build around that grief is really important. Whether it's you, whether it's another horse, whether it's other friends. I think one of the best images I've heard about grief is that when stuff is very, very sad and we go through a period of grief, that grief is never going to get smaller. It is the size that it is. It is the intensity it is. But your life is going to build around that grief. So every experience you have adds like a bigger amount of stuff that is part of you, that is part of your experience. And so if you only have 2 horses and their best friend dies, that grief feels huge to them. You're never going to diminish the grief. But what you can do is you can add other life experiences around that grief. Their life, their quality of life becomes rich and beautiful because of what is added. And so for those of you with only 2 horses, when you watch them and you think perhaps one of them won't be here someday, it's really important to think, is it possible for me to add enough beauty to their life after that moment of grief that their quality of life continues to improve? And I do know horses where, the best thing really is to put them to sleep when their best friend goes, because we have to make a judgment call. Maybe I don't feel like it is possible to add enough beautiful things to this horse's life after their best friend goes. And that is a judgment call. I will tell you, with Myrna and Cleo, my 2 mares that I had for a long time, Myrna died of a heart attack. And it was right after a long series of deaths in my family, including my mother. And I couldn't bear to part with Cleo. And Cleo stayed for another 1.5 years, but she was never quite the same after Myrna left. And she ended up dying of a colic about 1.5 years later. I am not sure that I was really able to fill her life with enough good things after Myrna left. Myrna left such a big hole in our herd that it did feel as though Cleo stayed for me as long as she could. And then at a certain point, she had to go too. Now, I don't know if my interpretation is correct. I don't know if maybe I could have done a better job in some way. Those are all beautiful theoretical questions. But it is an important thing to think about when you only have 2 horses, and one of them leaving will leave a massive amount of grief in the other one. Can we build enough good things around that grief that their quality of life becomes beautiful again and again and again and again? I think, coming back to the subject of today, watching is one of the ways we assess that. When we really watch them and we take that time of not needing to fix it or change it or do anything, just watch, our brain gets to work on all the positive things that we might do for them to make their life better. Whether you have 1 horse or 5 horses or 6 or 20, watching them and their interactions and their sequences and their patterns puts your brain into a problem-solving mode, because you're a herd animal too. You're going to help them have the best quality of life possible. Nancy says, I had horses go into the machine and use it as a squeeze box to find relief from the herd. So yes, I agree, they're individual, and some need the help to be healthier in a herd setting. Absolutely, Nancy. There's so many characters of people. There's so many characters of horses. We have to watch them, learn about them, understand them, and develop whatever positive solutions we can. Connie says, every day we're out together. I enjoy watching. Bard loves to hang close, and Doc is the curious guy. Sounds like a beautiful herd, Connie. Yeah. Crystal says, I love just going down there and being with the herd, seeing who notices, what first, what they do. Horses know grief so well. Even if a friend doesn't die, if their friend leaves forever, they don't know they're still alive. I like the idea of filling the gap with goodness. Yeah. And I don't know that it's even filling a gap. I think our life is constantly growing. Our life experience, we add to it every single day. And we want to keep adding good things. Every single day, we want to add more good things to our lives, to our horses' lives, to everybody's lives. So how do we do that? How do we add good things? I am going to say, lean on your creativity. Lean on the fact that your brain is naturally good at problem solving. If you give it enough time, watch your herd. If you can't sit still like me, absolutely fine. Find jobs to do. Find jobs to do where you can watch your herd while you do jobs. But let your brain be its beautiful creative self. And if you spend enough time watching your herd, you will find you come up with good ideas to make everybody's life better. And side effect, you also become a better horse trainer because you know them better. And you know if you're good. That is all for today. I want to thank you guys for joining me for tea time. I love talking with you as always, and I will be here next week from home, and then I am off to Georgia. So if any of you guys want to come join me in Georgia, I'm going to be doing an amazing herd clinic there with Mustangs at a Mustang sanctuary. So we're going to get to do a lot of watching, a lot of herd understanding, a lot of interacting with horses that are really good and interesting family members. So come see me in Georgia if you feel like you can. I'd love to see you there. After that, I will be in Australia for 6 weeks of clinics all over the country. And you can find my clinic list on my website or also on my Facebook page. Thank you guys for joining me. I'll see you next Tuesday.